Hi everyone, I'm just back from seeing Ari Aster's new film Eddington. Oh, how I want this to succeed, how I wanted it to be good. It's almost okay, but it's a run of bad movies now, to be honest. Well, certainly two in a row. And we need to think about what's gone wrong with Ari Aster. I want to do three things. I want to talk about the film and what does go wrong with the film. And I want to suggest a couple of reasons after that why Ari Aster might have lost his way. One is to do with his writing and his direction and what it means to win in the cultural landscape at the moment. And the other is to do with how things have changed in the last 10 years since he made his first feature, since he started to make his first feature. This film is about a sheriff in a town in New Mexico, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who is both in a kind of love rivalry and a political rivalry with the mayor of the town, who's played by Pedro Pascal, and that rivalry is inflamed by the fact that we're in we're in May 2020, and they disagree about whether or not you should wear masks. Joaquin Phoenix starts to embody as the film goes on, and he runs against Pedro Pascal for the mayorship, that kind of libertarian. In this film, it's presented very much like a white American position of kind of, we're going to fight the authority of the government. We're going to rip our masks off. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal represents a kind of new elite, I would say. There's a sense in which his world is more sophisticated. There's a cocktail party that he gives for donors, which kind of gives you a feeling when the Joaquin Phoenix character enters it that there's a polish, a wealth, and a sophistication to his world, and that Joaquin Phoenix's world is less privileged. There's also a younger generation who are responding to the death of George Floyd. They are engaged in Black Lives Matter protests. I would say that generation is treated with some contempt, actually, by this film. Gen Z gets no props from Ari Aster. They're all hypocrites. They're all performing for the internet. Have I yet made it clear, just even in that summary, that all of this is very familiar territory? The culture wars, the pandemic, the critique of Gen Z, the critique of the internet. Really, what does this film add? I was watching it desperately waiting for something surprising to happen. And really, it doesn't, and it's 2.5 hours long. The cinematography is beautiful, the direction is fluent a lot of the time. It's got Ari Aster's trademark movement of the camera, which is, so impressive at times. But I found myself wondering, why has he made this film? What is he trying to accomplish here, and why can't he see it doesn't work? And I have a couple of theories. One is that I think Ari Aster won. Back with Hereditary and Midsommar, he advanced a thesis, which was the structures of this particular genre, at that point the horror genre, can respond to and almost offer a kind of reading of the contemporary world through analogy, through use of detail, and through plot payoffs. They can give us a picture of the world at this point, of America or of any community in crisis. That's what we're seeing. And that he was brilliant at that. And what has happened is that as a result of that, we have now a slew of films, particularly in the horror genre, which also treat horror as an analogy or a metaphor for the world outside. And none of them, not even the ones I've liked, to me have been as good as his contributions. He brought something genuinely new to the genre, not in terms of the tropes he used, which were actually quite familiar, but in terms of the way he used them. He's a great formalist. The structure of his films is very, very controlled and perfect and disciplined. He's abandoned that, but that's what he had going for him. And of course, he had a subject, which again he's abandoned. The subject actually was the neurotic tensions of the American upper middle class home. That's what he actually made his films about. Whether you are a kind of bougie couple where she's a diorama artist but you're actually working out problems about American family life in the middle class, as in Hereditary, or whether you are grad students competing over membership of the elite in Midsommar, which then, I mean, as someone who's been a grad student, I watched Midsommar and I thought, yeah, that cult that they go into in Sweden feels a lot like the modern university, where sooner or later you're going to get thrown off onto a stone and bang your head open. But in the meantime, you sort of get this feeling that there is something real being worked out. Form and content meet. Then he completely proved that thesis. Everyone imitated him. Now every horror film is a metaphor for something. And really, the entire genre has become a bit repetitive. What do you do next? Well, I think what Ari Aster decided to do was abandon classical formalism and become much more expansive and kind of pose as a sort of shaman of contemporary America. And the problem with that is it doesn't work. I mean, it makes me think of a film like Nashville, where actually the director Altman did have the capacity to bring different classes, different life experiences together across all these differences and to build this panoramic vision. I don't think Ari Aster actually does have that capacity, and I also think that his claustrophobic style, everything is a diorama in Aster. You're always aware of the decor on the walls, right up to the cult stuff in Midsommar with all those detailed pictures. The setup of the sets, the dressing here has also been brilliant, by the way, but not for the large-scale New Mexico landscapes of this film, not for the big let's revisit Pale Rider and reveal it as a corrupt myth kind of idea behind this film. It doesn't play to his strengths. He's trying to move on for having won, but he's not finding his feet in a new form. And he really needs to stop worrying about content and to focus instead on finding a new form, because I think the content will come when he stops trying to be important and instead concentrates on his craftsmanship, which has always been his best feature. But then, how is he supposed to do that? And this brings me to my second and final point about context. How is he supposed to do that in a world where, just as his vision for horror got big at the box office, horror became, in some ways, a decoration to a world which was already going increasingly towards a horrific set of outcomes? Ari Aster's first film visibly belongs to an America where people grew up in a broadly liberal consensus and are confronted, like a sudden exploding figure of fire, with a new political reality which still feels shocking. What this film, in a sense, does capture, but also is destroyed by, is that that's over now. The generation Ari Aster dislikes so much have grown up without that consensus that he grew up with, and that world has died. So what film do you make that uses the distortions of the horror genre or the idealizations of the Western, when distortion and idealization and fetishization are everywhere you look? They're everywhere you look. Mediated kinds of extremism are all over the place. You don't need Austin Butler in a small role playing a cliched, charismatic lifestyle guru who's found repressed memories of abuse to think or talk about cabals of elite child abusers taking kids away on helicopters, because it's actually happened. We're all reading about it in the news. What does horror do, or what indeed does filmmaking of a generic kind do, when its colourful, shall we say, extremes are actually realism? And I'm not sure that the dense textures of this film or its slow pace are the answer to that question. Ari Aster is going to have to go back to the drawing board. We all are.